Hello and welcome to Nithrania Game Club. My name is Branislav Berec and you're watching Game in a Nutshell, the series of videos designed to teach how to play new board games. Today we're going to look at a new worker placement type of game from Capstone Games and Frosted Games called Cooper Island. In Cooper Island, each player arrives at one of the peninsulas of the island. After arriving, players will expand and explore their peninsula, and they will try to build it from this to something like this. Players will use their workers to gather resources so that they can build up these income boats and erect these buildings. These are the main sources of victory points in the game. To do that, they will need resources, and a lot of resources. To get resources, players will use their workers to take various actions on this central board of the island. They will build these income boats, these buildings, and for each of those they will get these points, which are called helm points, and they are victory points in the game. For each helm point, players will be able to move their ships, and when ships move over these islets, players can use the actions on those islets. And finally, these royal cards are some sort of an objective cards, which can also provide victory points at the end of the game. Whoever has the most points in the end of the game is the winner. First, assemble the island board. You can find the various setup options in the rulebook. Take these cargo ship cards and arrange them in an ascending order based on the number of these dashes in the bottom right corner. Then place this harbor master standing upright on the card number 1. Take these royal cards and in a 4-player game, display all of them next to the island board. In a 3-player game, display only 6 randomly chosen cards. And in a 2-player game, first remove this card number 8 from the game, and then display only 4 randomly chosen cards. Separate these building cards by their type, shuffle both decks and place them face down next to the island board. Then each player will choose a color and place these crate lids on each of the cargo ship cards. Then take a player board, worker board of your color, place buildings on these designated spaces on your player board, place the cartographer marker onto the 0 space of the cartographer track, 1 coin onto the storage spot, then 2 available workers, then 2 more normal and 2 special workers, and finally 4 milestone tokens. Then place these 6 income tokens and 6 islet tiles next to your player board as a personal reserve. Then place 5 ruin tokens onto these designated spaces on your peninsula. Each player has 1 peninsula, preferably the one which is closest to that player. Then place a single meadow tile onto the starting space of your peninsula, and then place 1 pink foot cube on top of it. Then place a ship with 1 sail on the left side of your harbor and a ship with 2 sails on the right side of the harbor. Take all these double landscape tokens and put them into the bag. Then each player would draw 2 tiles at random and add them to their personal reserve. Randomly determine the starting player, who will get this Cooper token, and then the first and the second player in the player order would move their cartographer marker to the space number 3, and then the third and the fourth player in the player order to the space number 4. The game of Cooper Island is played over 5 rounds, and each round has 3 phases. In the first phase, the income phase, players will get income, and they will also place one of these islet tiles and these double-sided landscape tiles onto their peninsula. In the second phase, the worker phase, players will place their workers onto these spots on the central board and carry out the corresponding actions. The third phase is the cleanup phase, but players will predominantly need to feed their workers. Then they will perform the remaining cleanup actions. In the first phase of the round, in the income phase, you can perform all the actions with this hand symbol 1 time. At the start of the game, you only have these 2 actions available. Later in the game, you can also perform actions from your boats. This income action allows you to place one of these islet tiles onto your peninsula, and this one lets you place one of these double-sided landscape tiles onto your peninsula. Now I will explain both of these actions. When you place an islet tile, take one of the tiles from your personal supply and place it onto your peninsula. This landscape space has to be placed onto these uncharted spaces, not occupied by a ruin token, and in addition it has to be adjacent to at least one other existing landscape space. The islet space has to be placed onto the water space. In the first phase of the game, this islet has to be placed on this water space on the right side of your harbor. So your first islet tile can be either placed like this or like this. Then immediately place the corresponding resource cube on the landscape space and perform the islet action. There are 4 types of landscape in this game. Mountains produce stone, forests produce wood, meadows provide food, and settlements can produce cloth. Mountains with 3 or more tiles can even produce gold. All the available islet actions are described in the rulebook. Later in the game, when placing the new islet tiles, you must always leave at least 1/2 of the sandbank visible. So you cannot place the new islet tile like this. This is a valid placement because both sandbanks have at least 1/2 visible. When you take this action and place the double-sided landscape tiles, take one of the tiles from your personal reserve and place it onto your peninsula. If you wouldn't have any double landscape tiles, you cannot take this action. In addition, when performing the action of the double landscape tile placement, you can never place these islet tiles instead. So, when you choose the tile, choose which side of the tile you want to use, and then place it onto your peninsula. You can either place it on uncharted spaces not occupied by a ruin token and adjacent to other landscape spaces, so for example like this, and then immediately place the corresponding resource cubes on top of both spaces, or you can place it on top of 2 existing landscape tiles which have the same height, which means the same cultivation level, and in addition those spaces may have no cubes or buildings or statues on top of them, so they must be empty, and the landscape types must match. You can only place meadows on meadows, forests on forests, mountains on mountains. However, you can place these settlements on any other type, even the settlement on other settlement. Again, after placing that tile, place the corresponding resource cubes on top of both spaces. If you have 1 level difference between 2 neighboring spaces, and that includes a level 1 space and an uncharted space, you can use this cartographer action, which I'm going to describe later in the video, to place a single landscape tile underneath the new double-sided landscape tile. Again, place the corresponding cubes on both spaces. In the second phase, the worker phase, starting with the first player and then continuing in a clockwise direction, players will take turns. On your turn, you must place one of your available workers onto an action space on the central board and perform the action. At the start of the game, each player has only 2 available workers, but over the course of the game, players will be able to unlock more workers. When placing workers, these normal workers can only be placed onto these circular spaces. Special workers can only be placed on these square spaces. You may place your workers on a free space, and if that space has any additional actions or modifiers, apply them immediately. Or you may place it on a stack of other workers of other players. However, each player can only have one of their workers on one space. When you place your worker on top of another worker to take the action, even if that spot has any additional actions or modifiers, you don't get those actions and modifiers because they have been already taken by other player. When you do place your worker on top of another worker, you have to pay a fee. You either have to pay a coin or a resource cube from your storage area or from your peninsula, and you need to pay this fee to the owner of the worker which is right underneath your worker. If you don't want to or cannot pay that fee, that player takes the cube or a coin from a general reserve, and you have to take this anchor token. Place it underneath one of your ships, and in case one of your ship has more anchor tokens than the other ship, give the anchor token to the ship with the fewer tokens. Anchor tokens actually stop your ships, and they are negative victory points at the end of the game. After placing a worker, you immediately perform the action depicted. Before explaining all the actions on the central board, I need to explain how to pay the cost and what to do with the helm points. Costs always have a number in red. When you need to pay in coins, you can only spend coins from your storage area. This is marketplace. If you have anything in a marketplace, you cannot use it at all unless you move it into your storage area. When you need to pay resources, you can either spend resources from this storage, but each resource cube has a value of 1, or you can spend resources from your peninsula. The value of each resource cube is equal to the level of that space. So this stone and wood are on top of one tile only, so their value is 1. This food has a value of 2, and this wood token and the gold resource have the value of 3. When you take the cube from your peninsula, you always use the full value, so in this case 3 gold. These helm points are basically victory points. When you gain any helm points, let's say by building a boat here, you can move one of your ships, and only one of your ships, that many steps forward. The ship with 1 sail moves clockwise, the ship with 2 sails moves counterclockwise. 1 step is from one sandbank to another sandbank. That's why you cannot cover both parts of the sandbank with islet tiles. As I said, you can only move one of your ships, you cannot split the movement. Anytime you pass over these islets, you can perform the action of that islet immediately. You can perform the action of the islet even if you pass over the opponent's islets. And by the way, there can be multiple ships in one location. When you reach this water bay, as depicted on that space, take a random logbook token. These logbook tokens are basically markers for 5 victory points, or 5 helm points, because it takes 5 steps to get from your harbor to the water bay space. Obviously, it also takes 5 steps from the water bay space to the harbor. When you get the logbook token, flip it to the other side, perform the action depicted, and then flip the token back to the helm point side. Again, you will find the description of the logbook actions in the rulebook. When you reach the harbor, first get the logbook and perform the action on the other side, and then you have to pay the harbor fee. You have to pay 1 coin or 1 cube to the owner of that harbor. If it is your own harbor, you have to pay it to the general supply. Again, if you don't pay, you take the anchor token, and the owner of the harbor would take the coin or a resource cube from the general supply. If you have an anchor underneath your ship cannot move. However, when you gain helm points, you can spend those helm points to remove anchors. Because each anchor is actually worth 1 negative victory point, and each helm is worth 1 positive victory point, for each helm point, you can remove 1 anchor token. If you have any helm points remaining, you can move your ship further. When you take the action at the location A, you can either draw 1 double landscape tile from the bag, or place 1 double landscape tile onto your peninsula. In addition, you can move your marker on the cartographer track 1 step forward. When you are first to place a normal worker on this space, you also get a first player Cooper token. When you are first to place a special worker here, you have plus between these 2 actions. That means you can draw a double landscape tile and place 1 double landscape tile onto your peninsula. When you take the action at the location B, you can build a boat. Choose a boat from your personal reserve and place it onto any free landing space on your player board. You have to pay the corresponding cost, then gain this number of helm points, place the income tile onto the landing space, and you can also perform this income action once immediately. You can find the description of the income actions in the rulebook. When you take this action with a special worker, the cost is reduced by 2. and either buy 2 coins, 2 wood, or 1 coin and 1 wood. When you take the action at the location C, the iconography should be already familiar. You can draw 1 double landscape tile from the bag, and you can place 1 double landscape tile onto your peninsula. If you are the first to take this action with a special worker, you can perform the action of 1 islet tile anywhere on the island board, either your islet tile or the tile of your opponents. When you take the action at the location D, you can build a building. You can build 1 small building, 1 large building, or a fortress. Again, if you take the action with a special worker, the cost is reduced by 2. You can build one of these 5 buildings on your player board. You have to pay the cost, which I will describe in a minute. Then take the building and place it onto the most cultivated free space on your peninsula. If there are more such spaces, you can choose whichever you want. However, if the most cultivated spaces already have cubes or buildings on top of them, choose the next most cultivated space. In addition, if you place it on the settlement, you gain 1 more helm point. Now, the cost of each building is depicted in these green spaces. To build a small building, you need to pay 1 coin, and that coin has to come from this storage area, and then 2 wood and 2 stone. Now, take a small building, place it onto your peninsula following these rules, and the small buildings actually uncover additional storage spaces. Then, as a result, you get 1 helm point, and then you can draw 4 cards from the small buildings deck, choose one of those cards, place it in front of you, and it will give you a permanent effect, and then return the other cards to the bottom of the deck. When you build the large building, follow the exact same procedure as for small buildings, but obviously the cost is higher. The large building unlocks another crafting space for the statues, and you gain 2 helm points and draw 4 cards from the large buildings deck. Choose one of those cards and place it face up in front of you, and return the other cards to the bottom of the deck. Large buildings give you a powerful so-called anytime action, and when you use that action, flip the card face down, and you will be able to reactivate that card during the cleanup phase. Finally, when you build the fortress, again follow the same rules for placement of the fortress onto your peninsula, and after paying the cost, you get 4 helm points, and you unlock an improved version of the reactivation action during the cleanup phase. When you take this action, you can move your cartographer marker 3 spaces to the right, and then take 1 coin or a resource cube and place it onto your storage spot. When you are first to perform this action with a special worker, you can also build 1 ship. When you take an action at the location F, you can either remove a ruin or place a statue onto your peninsula. When you are first to take the action with your special worker, you can take both of these actions. When you remove a ruin, take 1 ruin token which is adjacent to your landscape tiles. So in this case you would not be able to take these 2 ruin tiles. And after removing the ruin, place it onto any free statue crafting spot. Don't place the token with the ruin side face up, you can flip it to the statue side immediately. When you place the token onto this spot, you also get 1 helm point. When you build a statue, you have to have at least 1 statue token on your player board. You have to pay the indicated cost and follow the same placement rules as for any other building. By the way, the statue tokens and buildings can never be moved away from their spaces. After placing a statue, gain 1 helm point. In addition, you will score victory points for your statues during every cleanup phase. When you take this action, you can either draw 2 double landscape tiles from the bag or place 2 double landscape tiles onto your peninsula. If you are the first player to take this action with a special worker, in addition to the action, you can also move your cartographer marker 1 space forward. When you take an action at the location H, you can supply 1 cargo ship. When you're first to take this action with a special worker, you can also draw or place 1 double landscape tile. When you take this action, choose one of the cargo ships that still has a crate lid of your color. Then pay the supply cost, which is on top of that card, and as a reward you will get these helm points. In addition, take the crate lid and place it onto this area for unused crate lids. If the ship from which you took the crate lid has this harbor master standing upright, lay him down, and the cost of one of these cubes is reduced by 1. So you can either pay 3 clothes and 2 gold, or 4 clothes and only 1 gold. Anytime actions are actions that you can perform almost any time during your turn. They are represented with this hourglass icon. As I said, you can perform them almost any time, with one exception. When you pay cost, and you pay the cost from the storage area or from your peninsula, you have to pay the cost in one go. The first anytime action we're going to talk about is storage. With the storage action, you can take a cube from your peninsula and move it to your storage area. The value of the resource cube in the storage area is always 1. When performing the storage action, you can also move coins and resource cubes from this market space area to the storage area. Coins and resources in the market space cannot be used for any kind of action until they are moved into the storage. Each storage spot can only be occupied by one item, so either by one coin or by one resource cube. And you can never discard any item from your storage area in order to free up the space for another item. When you decide to pay, you can spend resources and coins in the storage area. If you would like to pay for this landing space, for example, you need 4 coins, and because you need to pay in one go, you cannot simply spend these 3 coins here, then use the anytime action to move this coin to the storage space, and then continue with the payment action to get a total of 4 coins. You simply have to pay everything in one moment. There are 3 anytime market trade actions. The first one allows you to change 2 clothes into 1 coin. Remember, resource cubes and coins from the market space can never be used in any kind of action, except the anytime storage action. So, in order to perform these market trade actions, you have to have resource cubes and coins in the storage area or on your peninsula. When you use the cubes from your peninsula, always use the full value. So, if I would first do the storage action to move my cube from the market space to the storage area, and I would take this cloth for the value 3, I have 4 value, which I can turn into 2 coins. I need to discard those cubes, and coins are placed to the market space. With the second action, you can turn 2 gold into any one resource cube, which is again placed into the market space. And the third option allows you to turn any 4 resources into any other resource or a coin. You can have unlimited number of items in your market space. However, during the cleanup phase, all the items from the market space will be removed. When you have a crate lid in this unused area, then as an anytime action, you can move this lid onto one of these 5 spaces. The first one lets you draw 1 double landscape tile, the second one lets you place 1 double landscape tile, this one allows you to move your cartographer token by 2 spaces forward, and with the last 2 actions you can either place 2 coins or 2 resource cubes, any resource cubes, onto the market space. To perform this anytime action, simply move your crate lid onto the action space and perform the action. The crate lid will remain in its place until the end of the game, unless you move it back with this action during the cleanup phase. The cartographer anytime action is also slightly limited. You can only perform this action once during the A phase, the income phase, then once per turn during the worker phase, and then only 1 time during the cleanup phase. When you take the first action, slide the cartographer marker 1 space to the left, and then when you place the double landscape tile and you have a 1 level difference, you can shim 1 landscape space of the corresponding type to even out the height difference. The single tile has to have the same kind of landscape as the space which goes on top of it. When you decide to take the second action, move your marker 2 spaces to the left, and then you can place a single space of any type on any uncharted space which is not occupied by a ruin and which is adjacent to at least one other landscape tile. Then you can place the corresponding resource cube on top of that space. When you take the third action, you need to move your marker 3 spaces, and then you can place a single space of the matching type or a settlement on top of existing space which has level 1 to 3 and doesn't have any buildings or resource cubes on top of it. When you do, place the corresponding resource cube onto that tile as well. And when you take the fourth action, move the marker by 4 spaces, and now you can place a single space on top of existing tile even if that tile has a level 4 or higher, and again place the corresponding resource cube onto that tile. The last type of anytime actions are on these large building cards, and when you take this action, flip the card face down, and it remains face down until the end of the game unless you unlock it in the cleanup phase. Each player starts the game with 2 available workers. Each player also has these 4 milestones, and when you reach one of those milestones, like have 2 buildings on your peninsula, have 2 crates in your area, 2 income boats or 2 statues, you can flip that token face down, and then you can either immediately or any time later in the game on your turn move that token to any 3 higher spaces. One of them shows the immediate reward of 2 helm points, but 3 others show these icons. When you move the token to one of these spaces, you can choose one of these workers and move it to the available area. When you take a normal worker, simply move it to this area. When you take the special worker, you have to immediately take one of the available workers and move it to one of the 3 royal cards. Each royal card can only hold 1 worker. When you move the token to the higher space and you decide to take a special worker, but you don't have any other available workers, even though they are probably on the island board, you must take this special worker and move it onto any 3 royal cards. All the workers on the royal cards are unavailable until the end of the game, and they will score victory points based on their conditions. When all players completed their turns with all of their workers, it's time for a cleanup phase. First and foremost, you have to feed your people. Calculate the feeding cost by taking this base value of 2 food and adding the value of uncovered spaces. So in this case it would be 5 food. If you pay the full cost and you have uncovered a space with this helm point, get that helm point. If you fall short, for each missing food you have to take an anchor token, and in addition you will not get this helm point. Then in the second step you can reactivate assets. You can either spend 2 coins and reactivate the large building card, or spend 1 coin and move one of your crate lids back into the unused zone. If you build a fortress and place it onto your peninsula, you unlock an improved version of this action, and you can take both of these actions free of charge. Then, in the third step of the cleanup phase, gain 1 helm point for each statue on your peninsula. Then, in the fourth step, again you can gain 1 helm point if you have covered all these 3 spaces on top of your peninsula. Then, in the next step, return all your workers back to your worker board. Then, in the next step, clean up your market space, simply by discarding all the resource cubes and coins in this area. And then in the last step of the cleanup phase, move the Harbor Master to the next cargo ship card. In addition, place him standing upright. If this was the last round of the game is over. At the end of the game, sum up all your victory points represented by helm points. First, count your logbooks. Each logbook counts as 5 helm points. Then, to account for helm points not covered by logbooks, check both of your ships and count how many spaces the ship has covered since getting the last logbook. So in this case, it is 1, 2, 3 spaces. The red player, after getting a logbook at this base space, moved 4 additional spaces. Again, check this for both of your ships. Then sum up the victory points from the royal cards where you have your worker. In this example, because this player built 3 income boats, that player would get 3 helm points. Note that these helm points are not cumulative. Then some of the building cards have this white flag in the top right corner. Those cards can also provide some additional helm points at the end of the game. Then gain points for leftovers. Gain 1 helm point for every 5 of the following items: coins or resource cubes on your storage area, any remaining points on the cartographer track, remaining double landscape tiles in your personal reserve, but the resource cubes on your peninsula don't count, but you can always take the storage action and move them into your storage area. Finally, lose 1 victory point for each anchor token you have. Sum up all the points and whoever has the most points is the winner. And that's how you play the Cooper Island. If you would have any questions or comments, please put them into the comment sections below. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. If you like the show, if you like the series, please subscribe. My name is Branislav Berec. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell and hope to see you next time.